almost out of beer again. And I have the fact that we've got beer pretty much figuratively on tap, that it goes quicker, or if it's summer and now we're thirstier, regardless, we are running out of beer and it's an issue. So I'm getting brewing again, and I'm going to take you guys through our next batch of beer brewed. Of an Indian pale ale and an unhopped malt extract. Okay, so this is cracked malt in a brewing bag. It's effectively steeping, and at about 75 degrees we are extracting some of the flavor from the malt in this bag, and this is the first step in the process. Okay, we're now going to, as this is pretty much done and been going for about half an hour, we're going to empty this into our brewing tank and start adding some of the other ingredients. We try not to waste anything, so this now steeped malt I'm going to give to the chickens. We haven't fermented yet, so no drunk chickens here. Those two in now, that's the next addition according to the recipe. And it is that, they're really just recipes. I am no master brewer, but it's a great starting place to utilize the recipe and pre-made ingredients and just get into the whole brewing process. As a gauge, we're going to put it up to sort of 23 litres is what we're aiming for. 23 litres will bottle 440ml bottles of beer sitting on the wall. It's awesome. Now for the last ingredient, and that's the yeast. This is the most amazing part. It's effectively the activator, the thing that gets the fermentation process going. And the little known fact, or maybe widely known and just forgotten, is that yeast is a living culture. It's an alive animal, and it's its process of fermenting that creates the beer, and it's just such an amazing thing to wrap your head around. You know, we drink beer all the time, or we drink alcohol, or we enjoy nice artisanal breads, whatever the case may be, but it is only because of this living culture that it's even possible. And how humans stumbled upon this was largely by mistake. And to think that we might never have enjoyed a beautiful alcoholic beverage or a beautiful artisanal bread without getting to grips with and understanding what a yeast is all about. A living culture. Bacteria, really. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's intriguing. If you allow yourself to get into it, it can enthrall you. And I think that's why there's these fermentation almost under societal undertones or currents or cults even. I feel myself being drawn down that road and drinking the proverbial Kool-Aid, but in this case beer. Aspects of brewing that I completely underestimated or was not aware of was the need for it to be clinically clean. It's a process that requires almost lab level clinical cleanliness. You have to pre-wash and sterilize absolutely everything. Any form of contamination could completely ruin the batch. So the other thing you've got to do is try and keep exposure to the outside elements in the air, and any sort of bacteria or anything that could contaminate that's floating around in the air getting into your beer. So you actually have to speed up the process, and probably why I'm starting to talk faster and faster is I'm realizing the pressure of getting this batch done. So something else that I sort of wasn't aware of or underestimated at least is that even though the yeast is the, as I mentioned before, sort of activator, it itself adds flavor. Again, I wish you could smell the two different yeasts I've put in that are actually going to start the process are also flavorants to a degree and create the aromas and also add to the body of the beer itself. I think you can see on the edges there it's already starting fermentation. I better get cracking. And the process is putting on this airlock. Basically it's by filling it, and you can see here there's water on both sides, it creates a barrier to the outside world or atmosphere where your bacteria and or other contaminants could get in. So that's just something that we've got to put in place. Nice thing about this is once it starts to brew, it's also an indicator, so that you can start to see as it bubbles through here that the fermentation process is starting. And then towards the end, when this slows down, it starts to give you an indication that we may be getting towards the end of this particular batch's brewing process. One of the other ingredients that you're probably wondering about, and one that's obviously common to the brewing of beer, is hops. And why by this point I haven't put any hops in, or you haven't been exposed to that element. Well, this particular recipe calls for putting the hops in as flavorants later in the process. So on about day 5 we'll add these into the brew mix, and we'll open up the top and drop them in, and that will add flavor. There's 2 reasons that you add hops, and there's various kinds of hops. The 2 reasons are to add bitterness and flavor. So depending on where you add them in the brewing process, it's going to do one of those 2 things. Generally speaking, earlier in the process you're doing it for bittering, and later in the process you're doing it for flavor. This is a beer from previous batch. It's a creamy Irish red ale. The one we've just gone through or started brewing is it's an IPA, which I'm quite keen to try out. Those are my 2 sort of favorite beers. So that's obviously start with what you know and what you're going to consume, and what you're going to consume fast, so you keep brewing and learning. So the other thing I wanted to cover and just sort of mention, beyond just the fun of it, and beyond the education process, and beyond better understanding sort of, without getting too esoterical, the full circle of life and how yeasts and everything else fit into that, the meditative process of brewing is fantastic. It gives you all of that, plus at the end of the day, one of the things in tough economic times, and here in South Africa I think we're officially now in recession, 2 consecutive months of negative growth, we're officially there. It actually makes financial sense to brew your own stuff. You know, I think the cost per beer I'm currently at is around 10 Rand a beer. I exclusively, through more lifestyle choice and environmental concerns, etc., exclusively drink craft beer, and it does generally come in at a premium. So to be able to brew it myself and consume and enjoy my own beers is highly rewarding, but also financially rewarding, because at the end of the day I'm paying probably 1/3 of what I would in the shops. So yeah, just food for thought, and yeah, something to think about. But at the end of the day, it's a great process, and I've enjoyed showing you guys this, and thanks for coming on the journey. Cheers.